I don't know who you are, but this is private property.
What are you talking about? I've been working here for 2 years.
Prove it.
Prove it? Okay. Well, the key code to the back doors, Hey, wait a minute. You're trying to trick me. You're the one who's not supposed to be here.
Splinter Cell Chaos Theory was released on March 1st, 2005 in North America for the PlayStation 2, Nintendo GameCube, original Xbox, and PC. The game was developed by Ubisoft's Montreal branch, like the first game in the series, and had a development time of slightly more than 3 years instead of just the 2 years that Pandora Tomorrow had. It is widely considered by Splinter Cell fans to be the best in the series, and today I would like to hold this game to intense scrutiny to see if it really is deserving of that legacy. What's up guys, Acer Thorn here, and welcome to another video game analysis and discussion video. I do these types of videos on a regular basis, so if you'd like to see more of them, hit that subscribe button to stay notified. Now just a heads up, just in case you didn't see my Pandora Tomorrow retrospective. I will not be covering the multiplayer of this game, and that goes for both versus mode and co-op. Unlike Pandora Tomorrow, the two multiplayer modes are still playable, although versus mode does require an unofficial mod to work. But I'm just not a multiplayer guy, so I probably wouldn't have fun and wouldn't know how to judge the game even if I could access it. This retrospective will be entirely focused on the single-player campaign for this game. One thing I definitely found infuriating about this game was getting it to actually freaking play. I had heard about Pandora Tomorrow's technical woes when it comes to actually getting the game to work on modern computers, but I figured that would all be behind me with Chaos Theory. Turns out, nope. Turns out, this game crashes to desktop as soon as I try to load a mission also. Well, it turns out I needed to download a widescreen fix, which is weird since this game purports on its face to have native support for 1280 by 720 and 1920 by 1080 resolutions. Why would I need a widescreen fix if widescreen support is already built in out of the box? But it turns out that isn't even enough. I also have to run the game in compatibility mode for Windows XP Service Pack 2, and I also have to update the shader models to 3.0 because modern graphics cards don't support shader model 1.1. Oh, and I have to update the shader model to 3.0 before I change anything else about the graphics settings, because if I try to change any other settings from default before I've changed the shader model, that results in a crash to desktop too! After I finished the first mission, I closed down the game since I figured I would just be able to play the game now. Well, when I went to play the second mission, I encountered the exact same problems as before. Are you freaking kidding me? After that, I decided to simply leave the game up overnight as I played this game for footage so the game doesn't crash on me again, leading me to rack up a total of 90 hours of playtime, which is far more than what I actually played. I really hope that I won't encounter this same problem with any of the future Splinter Cell games, because twice was twice too many. So, with that messy business behind us, let's move on to talking about the actual game. The graphics are a huge step up from the previous game. Sam's new wetsuit actually looks sleek and shiny this time around, although I have to wonder, is shiny really a good thing when his job is to stay out of sight? I consider that to be on par with Sam's glowing goggles, in that it's something that's just there for the player's enjoyment, but which doesn't really exist in universe. Anyway, the shadows are likewise a huge improvement, although I must admit that there are a few times when I could clearly see Sam myself, even without night vision. yet the light meter on my HUD was all the way to the left. If I'm in total darkness, then Sam should completely disappear if I'm not wearing night or thermal vision. However, there is one aspect of the graphics that I have a love-hate relationship with, and that's the animations. For example, when you sneak up on a person, or in some instances when a person walks past you, Sam will slowly reach for his knife. More on that when we discuss the gameplay. Now, when I played this game as a teenager, I thought this was an awesome addition, one that added to the immersion. However, nowadays the game companies are being taken to task for their abusive crunch periods, overworking their developers to the point of said developers having breakdowns. As Jim Sterling once put it, little details like Red Dead Redemption horses' testicles that shrink in cold weather may be cute little aesthetic additions, but are they really worth the health and sanity of your game developers? Nowadays, I see Sam slowly reaching for his knife as much the same way. I'm forced to wonder how many developers' health and sanity were compromised for such a superfluous detail. It's kind of like looking back at old wrestling matches from that same time period and seeing wrestlers take steel chair shots to the head. It was awesome to see that back then, but now that the health effects of such shots are common knowledge, seeing them in older wrestling matches really take me out of the nostalgia. As for the audio, the music for this game is once again relegated to having only a single piece of music per mission. The game once again has universal music for when Sam's presence is felt, and when he's full-blown detected, regardless of which mission you're in. Of course, since there are now different levels of NPC suspicion and awareness, the music that plays in such cases is more varied than in the first game. Unfortunately, I can only play the main menu theme song for this game in the background of this video because, to my utter annoyance, I found that the composer for this game's soundtrack will place a copyright claim on nearly every other song in this game. I tested this by downloading the entire Chaos Theory soundtrack, and then re-uploading that same soundtrack to my own channel as an unlisted video, and lo and behold, I received copyright claims on nearly every one of them. And no, I highly doubt I would be able to claim fair use in this case. This video is a retrospective, which is fair use, but it's a retrospective of the game. This gives me the right to use clips from the game as part of my retrospective, but if I were to simply add music from the game to my own commentary, then I'm using the music in an original capacity, and that's not fair use. I can only claim fair use of the game's soundtrack if I'm reviewing specifically this soundtrack. For this reason, I will only be playing the main menu theme for this entire video, so I apologize if that gets on your nerves after a while. There's nothing I can do. However, there is one area of the audio that I can play for you, and that's the dialogue. Put simply, the dialogue is much, much better this time around, and not just because the original cast of voice actors are back together after being absent from Pandora Tomorrow. Even the dialogue itself is much, much better this time around. Sam Fisher is equipped with a great dry wit, which he uses to great effect in banter with both his crew and his enemies. To show you what I mean, listen to this clip from Splinter Cell 1.
What the hell?
I'm going to ask you some questions, but I think you're lying. I'll do this.
Fucking hilarious. Now let's have a look at the top 10 lines of dialogue from Splinter Cell Chaos Theory. Number 10.
Didn't anyone ever tell you that spelunking is dangerous?
Oh no! You're going to kill me, right?
Only if you say the word monkey.
Number 9.
That's half of the forged mail, Sam. 4 more to go.
Thanks. I've always found it hard to count past 3.
No need to be smarmy, Sam.
Number 8.
Pick a number between 1 and 10.
What? Oh, crap. 3!
Lucky guess. You get to live. Now tell me something useful or we'll play another round.
Number 7.
Maria Narcissa.
You're not trying to set me up on another blind date, I hope.
The Maria Narcissa is a boat.
So was the last girl you set me up with.
Fisher.
Sorry.
Number 6.
Good job, Fisher. Now the whole mission will look like a robbery. They'll never know why we were here.
Lambert, now that I'm holding 50 million bucks, I think we need to talk about that raise again.
25 cents an hour and not a penny more.
Deal.
Number 5.
Shh. I'm not going to hurt you.
Who are you? Wait a minute. Is this a training exercise?
Damn. Support. This guy knows it's an exercise. Who let the cat out of the bag?
Number 4.
Thanks, Sam. That's the last one. I can't wait to stick around and displace the laundry basket. What?
Laundry. I totally forgot.
Number 3.
Bad news.
I know it. I know there were ninjas here.
What?
Yeah, you must be a ninja. How else could you sneak up and grab me like that?
Listen, I don't know what...
Wow, I can't believe it. A real live ninja.
Listen, I'm gonna kill you if...
Wow, killed by a ninja. Cool.
Number 2.
Where did you take Jung?
I don't know what you're talking about.
He's not answering. Should I kill him?
Negative.
All right. They say I should kill you, so...
Wait, okay.
And everyone's favorite, number 1.
All right, I don't know who you are, but this is private property.
What are you talking about? I've been working here for 2 years.
Prove it.
Prove it? Okay. Well, the key code to the back doors, Hey, wait a minute. You're trying to trick me. You're the one who's not supposed to be here.
The sad thing is that this could arguably be seen as a retcon of Sam Fisher's character. In addition to him appearing completely humorless in the first game, there's also a cutscene at the end of the first game where Sarah explains that Fisher has no sense of humor whatsoever. Of course, while this could be seen as a retcon, it could also be seen as character development. After all, he was laughing in the final cutscene of the first game, so one could argue that, for decades, Sam Fisher had just jumped around from one position in the military to another, being content with his work but never truly happy. When he became a Splinter Cell, he finally started to feel more in his element, and therefore began to loosen up. But even if this was a blatant retcon and not just character development, I would still much prefer this version of Sam Fisher over the first game's version. After all, despite what Lambert tells Fisher at the beginning of the second mission, this is indeed a video game. It's meant to be fun, and so the more fun the characters are having in-universe, the more fun I'm having playing the game. With Pandora Tomorrow, the best I could say about the graphics and sound were one step forward, one step back. But I can't say that here, without a shadow of a doubt. The graphics and sound are a huge improvement over the first 2 games, bar none. The first thing you're going to notice when you fire up the first mission in the game is the new gadgets that Sam has at his disposal. His electromagnetic vision will turn the entire screen navy blue, while highlighting anything electronically controlled in white. However, this comes at the expense of being able to see literally anything else in the game. Because of this, it really is only useful in one mission in the entire game. Of course, you still have your thermal vision, which is largely unchanged from the previous 2 games, as well as your night vision, which, instead of turning the game's graphics into monochrome, actually gives the graphics a green tint to them. Honestly, I prefer the monochrome visuals of the previous 2 games, although I realize that's subjective. The laser mic has been retired and is now a part of Sam's binoculars. In addition to completing several mission objectives where you're supposed to laser mic on conversations, the laser mic is also optional in several other places where you can eavesdrop on potentially useful information, such as door codes or alternative paths in the missions. This resolves the problem from the previous 2 games where Fisher actually has a laser mic in his arsenal only for missions where he actually needs it, even when Lambert had no way of knowing that Sam Fisher would actually need the laser mic. Now he just always has it in case he needs it. Speaking of your binoculars, you are now equipped with a remote tapping app that allows you to access the contents of any computer hard drive from afar, as long as you have a direct line of sight with the computer tower. In the previous game, I criticized the whistle ability for being way too overpowered, but here it honestly seems that the remote tapper is the overpowered ability, since it allows you to stay a safe distance from any guards who might otherwise spot you while still being able to hack into top secret stuff. The only thing that keeps this from becoming a win button like the whistle in the previous game is that some computers can't be hacked from a distance. Unfortunately, it seems rather arbitrary and random which computers can and can't be hacked remotely. As for your pistol, the RNG from your aiming is now gone. You can now consistently hit your target as long as you're standing still. This eliminates the need for the laser pointer from Pandora Tomorrow, so instead the alt-fire on your pistol activates what's known as the OCP. This is basically a wireless, invisible, silent energy wave that temporarily disables any electronic equipment that it hits. This can be used to give yourself some darkness to move around in, as well as providing a diversion to force enemies to turn their backs to you. You'll quickly prefer the use of your OCP to take out lights, as shooting them out suddenly becomes an inferior option due to the improved enemy AI, which I'll discuss in a minute. The sticky cameras are also gone completely from this game. Wait, what's that? You say that this game does indeed have sticky cameras? Well, yes, but these are not the same sticky cameras as in the previous games. These are actually the diversion cameras from the previous games because they can now make noise and emit knockout gas. In the previous two games, the sticky cameras could only really be used for eavesdropping and absolutely nothing else. This made them completely inferior to the diversion cameras, since the diversion cameras also had the ability to do that, plus the ability to, create diversions. It was like giving me a state ID after I already had a driver's license. There was literally no point whatsoever to using the sticky cameras of old, but in Chaos Theory, the redundant sticky cameras have been retired, while the diversion cameras were renamed sticky cameras. Last but not least, Sam now has a knife that can be used both as a weapon and a tool. Using this knife, he can now break a door's lock open, which bypasses the lockpicking minigame but makes a lot of noise, cut through some thin walls to create openings he can pass through, as well as destroy some generators so they can't be turned back on. Sadly, the knife has very few actual uses despite it being featured prominently in this game. That about does it for Sam's new gadgets. His new abilities are few, but they are massive. First of all, the whistle ability is back, but it has been given a much-needed nerfing, thanks to the improved enemy AI, but I'll go into more detail about that when I discuss the AI in depth. Sam now has the ability to take out guards while hanging upside down from pipes, which looks incredibly badass but is almost never actually needed to pass through an obstacle. However, the greatest addition to Sam's abilities has to be his new arsenal of lethal melee attacks. In the past, lethal force could only be deployed using projectiles. Melee attacks were exclusively non-lethal. Aside from fall damage, the opportunity for which was very rarely presented, killing a person absolutely required you to use a bullet. In Chaos Theory, however, there are different animations for both lethal and non-lethal attacks. In the past games, when you've grabbed an opponent from behind, you would then deliver a judo chop to the neck, knocking them out, but in Chaos Theory, you can non-lethally choke him out or lethally break his spine. When hanging from a pipe, you can either choke him into unconsciousness or twist his neck until his neck snaps. When running up to him from behind, your only melee attack in past games was to deliver a forearm strike to his head. But in Chaos Theory, not only do you have both lethal and non-lethal melee attacks, but you have different animations depending on whether you're behind, beside, or in front of your enemy. Behind him, you can either stab him in the back or deliver a single punch to the side of his head. Beside your enemy, you can either slit his throat or deliver a palm strike to knock him out. When in front of your enemy, you can either stab him in the gut or deliver a knee strike to the gut. The new melee attacks add a nice amount of replay value to these missions. Even the most linear of missions can be completed using either lethal or non-lethal melee attacks. Unfortunately, aside from getting to see the cool animations, the novelty of which wears off pretty quickly, there is honestly no benefit to choosing lethal force over non-lethal force. In the rare instances where killing someone is a primary objective, if you select non-lethal force, the game will simply override your input and give you the lethal animation anyway. If at any point you have a choice between kills or knockouts, there would never be any benefit to selecting the former. Any kills, except those which are mission critical, will reduce your mission score, so if you want to get 100% on your mission, you are forced to use exclusively non-lethal force anyway. It's not like knocking a guard out provides insufficient benefit anyway. The only difference as far as gameplay is concerned between a knockout and a kill is that a knocked out guard can be revived by another guard. If no guard finds him, he stays knocked out indefinitely, but if you're diligent in hiding the bodies, this should never become an issue for you anyway, and even if a knocked out guard does get woken up, actually having to backtrack on a level is surprisingly rare, so they wouldn't be able to gang up on you anyway. It's weird because the game actually calls attention to this flaw in the game design. In the final mission of the game, Fisher says his job would be a lot easier if he were allowed to kill guards. No, it wouldn't. Knocking out guards gets them out of the way just fine. The game really should have provided a clear benefit to killing enemies that would make it worth the penalty to your mission score. For example, imagine if a knockout was only temporary. A guard would remain knocked out for only 5 minutes. He could be woken up early by a conscious guard, but after 5 minutes he wakes up on his own, complete with sounding the alarm and knowing that you're there. Then there would be a direct benefit to killing him, as this ensured that sparing his life wouldn't come back to bite you in the ass later. So, new abilities, new gadgets. What else can we add to the experience? Well, how about some new stealth mechanics? Sadly, there's only one major addition to the actual stealth portion of the gameplay, but it is a doozy of an addition. As in the previous games, you need to stay in the shadows. That's still part of the course, but there's also a new sound meter. The squares on the sound meter light up the more noise Sam makes. There's also a marker that goes back and forth across the sound meter, which represents how loud the ambient noise is. Any noise Sam makes that doesn't go past the square the marker is located on is effectively masked by his environment. There's even a couple of points when Sam can fire a gun without being overheard. This adds a whole new layer of strategy to your gameplay, since you can now book it more often without being overheard, and sometimes moving faster than normal while under the cloak of loud ambient noise is actually necessary. All of these new toys would make the game way too easy were it not for the improved enemy AI. Gone are the dumbasses who can't even so much as look down to see you, or who always walk like good little sheep into the shadowy area where you just whistled in, so they can easily be grabbed from behind. One of the biggest improvements to enemy AI is that they never go back down to the lowest state of awareness. Once you've tipped them off to your presence, they'll constantly be on the alert for the rest of the mission. For example, here's a clip from the third mission. At the beginning of that mission, I head to the left of the building and turn off the generators, so that the lights in the front yard are all black. This certainly made it easier for me to cut to the other side of the building in order to get to the rooftop. But then, as I was making my way back to the front yard for extraction, I noticed that the front yard guards were more actively patrolling the area, looking for the prankster who thought it was cute to take away their light. Even though it was nearly half an hour since I last saw them, they were still on the alert. The only way to keep the NPCs in this game at the lowest state of alertness is to ensure that they never go higher than that in the first place. However, one thing about the enemy AI that breaks immersion for me is how everyone in this game is such a pussy. A few times it's kind of funny that the guards would say things like, "Okay, I'll admit it, I'm scared," or "Forget it, I don't want to find anything anyway." However, every guard in the game. Literally every single one of them is a fucking coward. It honestly just breaks immersion that every security guard in the world is so pathetically incompetent at the very thing he's trained to do, keep an eye out for intruders. It would be like if the overwhelming majority of firefighters suffered from immense pyrophobia, or the vast majority of rocket scientists working at NASA sucked at math. Again, it's funny every once in a while, but like the lethal animations, the novelty wears off fast. So all of these new gadgets, new abilities, and new and improved enemy AI call for a new mission structure in order to take advantage of all these new additions the game has. This is where most fans say the game shines the best, and quite frankly, I'm not sure I agree with that. I'll certainly go into more detail when I discuss the individual missions, but suffice it to say, I'm not really sure the missions are as open-ended and non-linear as so many people think they are. One thing I will say in the positive about this game is how there are multiple ways to complete some missions. I personally was able to find 4 different ways to play most missions. The first is the classic Splinter Cell playstyle, where you knock out the bodies, hide the bodies in the shadows, and shoot out the lights to create darkness. This was practically the only way to play the first 2 games. The other way is what I like to call lethal stealth. This is exactly like the classic playstyle, except that you make sure to kill everyone. As I mentioned earlier, there's really no reason to use lethal force except to see the cool animations, so this playstyle provides you with such an opportunity. At the bottom of the barrel is the full assault playstyle, where you essentially treat the game like a third-person shooter and just go in guns blazing. This is a Splinter Cell game, so this honestly isn't my preferred way of playing, but the option is there for you. You know, if you're a weirdo. The most popular and probably the most fun way to play most of these missions is with the Ghost playstyle. This means that you don't simply avoid killing anyone or setting off alarms, you don't even so much as knock them out or shoot out the lights. You go through the entire mission while leaving behind precisely no evidence that you were ever there to begin with. This is hands down my preferred method of playing, and the only bad thing I can say about this play style is that it isn't a viable option in literally every mission of the game. Then, when you actually get into the missions, there's the objectives themselves. Objectives are broken up into 4 different levels of priority. Primary objectives must be completed in order to complete the mission. In the past 2 games, the missions were comprised exclusively of primary objectives, but in this game, primary objectives are only necessary for an any percent run. Secondary objectives are objectives that are optional in this mission, but if you don't complete them in this mission, they'll become primary objectives in a future mission. Meanwhile, optional objectives are, well, optional. If you don't complete them in this mission, you lose that opportunity. You usually only have one of these objectives per mission, but to make up for that, the objective is usually multi-layered. There's between 3 and 6 spots where the optional objectives have to be performed. The problem here is that, in order to get the credit in your mission score for the optional objectives, you have to hit literally all of the spots where the optional objectives can be located. If you miss even one spot, you might as well not do the objective at all, because you will get literally 0 credit for it. The game really should have given you prorated credit for partially completed objectives, because in missions where I can't seem to find that one remaining spot to perform an optional objective, I often find myself backpedaling all over the map like a chicken with his head cut off, trying to find that one remaining damn shipping crate. It's the sunk cost fallacy at work. If you've already committed to doing the optional objectives, you want to make sure you complete them all so the effort you've already expended doesn't go to waste. Last but not least, we have the bonus objectives, and only a few missions even have them. There's only one spot where you need to do these optional objectives, but the biggest difference is that they aren't given to you ahead of time. You won't even know the bonus objectives are there until after you've completed them. Sam will usually tap into some computer, get the intel, and his team will congratulate him for stumbling upon such a juicy find. They aren't necessary to get a 100% mission rating, and they have no impact on the game other than providing some context for the co-op mission campaign, which I will not be covering here. See the earlier part of the video for details. I don't really mind the bonus objectives, they're relatively unintrusive, but then again, I wish you actually got some mission points for doing them. That doesn't even necessarily have to penalize those who won't do the bonus objectives if you set it up right. Think about it like a bonus question on a test when we were in school. Depending on how the teacher chose to run the class, completing the bonus questions could enable you to get higher than 100 on the test, or it could allow you to miss a couple of questions on the main test and still get 100 by getting the bonus questions right. A similar system could have given us an incentive to seek out the bonus objectives. They could have been our saving throw, enabling us to get 100% on the mission if we got spotted or killed a guy. In fact, combine this idea with the aforementioned suggestion of knocked out guards waking up after a short time. We could plan our mission in advance, think of a few strategic places where we may choose to kill 1 or 2 guards rather than simply ghost past them, and still get 100% on the mission because we completed the bonus objective. But hey, I'm just spitballing at this point. By this point, Sam Fisher is comfortably in his career as a Splinter Cell, so it would be ludicrous to put him into a tutorial mission. So instead, to teach the player the new game mechanics, there are several optional videos that can be watched. The only one that I honestly enjoyed was the video What Not to Do, just for the wah 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 factor.
What happened to that light? Who broke that lock? Another light off. Man down. I think he's unconscious. Hey, are you okay? What happened?
We have an intruder. Sound the alarm.
Other than that, however, the training videos honestly seem woefully inadequate to actually teach the player how to actually use the game's mechanics, all because of one fatal shortcoming. It doesn't account for when the player might change the game's controls from their default setting. For example, here I am in the third mission, trying to remind myself how to do the hacking minigame since it's been a few years since I played this game. I click on the mouse in order to try and lock one of the lit up numbers into place, but it's not working. I pull up the training video for this minigame, and I'm told that I need to press the E key to lock the number into place. Well, I go back into the game, give it a try, and set off an alarm. I had to figure out, on my own, that the problem was that I had changed the controls so that the E key was what I pressed in order to interact with an object, such as opening a door, while the F key was the key I used to draw or holster my weapon. Well, as it turns out, the controls for the hacking minigame also got switched around, so I needed to press the F key to lock a number in place and the E key to select a combination on the left side of the screen. However, the training video still said that it was the E key that I needed to press in order to lock the number in place on the right. Once I figured that out, the hacking minigame became significantly easier, but the training videos really should have been adjusted for customized controls. So overall, the mission structure is a qualified success. The multiple playstyles give the game some replay value, and the optional objectives allow for any % runs. However, the missions themselves are hit or miss, and to show you why, I'll need to talk about each mission in detail. This leads me to... The game begins with a shot of this boat, where some POWs are held captive. We see one guy back away from a dead body before getting knocked out by a gun by one of the ship's guards. Who is this guy? Who is this guy? What does any of this have to do with anything? I don't know. The game doesn't tell us. It never fucking explains anything. You could have started the game with this cutscene. And it would have made about as much goddamn sense. Your first mission of the game starts out as a rescue mission. A computer geek named Morgenholt, who may or may not be the guy from the opening cutscene, but that's never made clear, has been captured, and you're tasked with entering the enemy base and rescuing him. Right off the bat, if you've played every Splinter Cell game up to this point, you'll probably notice that something is fishy. How would Morgenholt accompany you on the second half of the mission without him constantly giving away your position? Shouldn't an actual rescue mission be a job for the Navy, since they don't need to worry about staying incognito? Well, your suspicions are confirmed when you actually reach Morgenholt and you find out that he's already dead, so your primary objective is cancelled. This means that your whole reason for coming here in the first place was entirely pointless. Your only primary objective at this point is to erase the data they've collected from Morgenholt, and once you've done that, you're on to extraction. Honestly, did they really even need that primary objective? After all, this mission is clearly meant to ease the player into the game mechanics. Rescuing Morgenholt was the only thing that brought you here, but now that you're there, it's just a matter of making it to the end. This would give the player an opportunity to use every major gameplay mechanic without having to worry about screwing up or overshooting primary objectives. Speaking of which, I greatly appreciate how this mission doesn't have any central alarm system. This is something the first two games in the series needed to understand: progressive difficulty. The game should start out with the easiest mission and gradually get more difficult as the game progresses, instead of throwing arbitrary restrictions on you in the first mission. You also get your first taste of optional objectives in this mission when you're told to scan weapon crates. Again, in keeping with this theme of progressive difficulty, this is the easiest of the optional objectives. We're only meant to scan the weapon crates. While we can do this by walking up to them, we can also stay in the shadows and scan them from a safe distance with our EEV. In addition, aside from the first crate, which requires you to ever so slightly go out of your way, every other crate in the mission is in plain sight. Simply following the path from the beginning to end will usually cause you to stumble upon most of the crates. As for that first crate, this is actually one of the few times in the game when there is a branching path on how to proceed. As you enter a cavern, you'll notice a rickety bridge on the right, but there's also a ledge on the left that you can walk on. The quickest way to get to the first crate is by going onto the ledge. Not only that, but it's the easiest way to avoid the two guards who are on their way to your area. One aspect of this mission that I do not like is that it is impossible to ghost. You can ghost past nearly every enemy in the game except for the last one. Your extraction is meant to be by helicopter on top of the lighthouse. In order for it to be safe to extract, you have to ensure that the lights are out. That much makes sense. However, what they don't tell you is that you also need to make sure the top of the lighthouse is unguarded, and since there's a guard patrolling the top of the lighthouse, you have to take him out before you can extract. You can't simply go past this guy. No matter what, you absolutely must take him out. Otherwise, the game will not let you extract. If there was one blemish on this otherwise decent first mission of the game, it would have to be this. They should have given me a means of ghosting past this guy, just like what I can do with everyone else on the island. So anyway, the guy who orchestrated Morgan Holt's kidnapping and murder was a Peruvian guy called Lacerda. He's boarding a cargo ship called the Maria Narcissa to accompany his weapon shipments. This begs the question of why the Maria Narcissa would allow a civilian to board their cargo ship, since the ship is clearly not meant for civilian passengers. We're told that we'll be deposited a few clicks, whatever that means, away from the ship via helicopter and we'll have to swim to get on board. Despite this, we start the mission simply standing on deck. I honestly wonder how they expected this to actually work. The ship is out to sea, so it must be moving really fast. Can Sam swim as fast as a boat? Or did they deposit him a few clicks in front of the boat and expect him to grab onto as soon as the boat passed him? Weird. Anyway, our mission is to find Lacerda on this ship and take him out before he can do any more damage. While we're searching for him, we get an optional objective to plant tracking devices on the various crates of weapon shipments so we can see who they end up getting delivered to. Of course, since this is an optional objective, the rest of the game has to be designed around the assumption that the player didn't complete this objective, which means it has no bearing on any future events in the game. We do not, for example, go after the guerrillas who received a weapon shipment because Redding managed to track the crate to that terrorist group, since the game has to assume we didn't complete that objective. This optional objective is a step up from the optional objective in the last mission, since you aren't supposed to simply scan the crates. You can't stay a safe distance before scanning them with your EEV. You absolutely must get up close and personal with the crates in order to plant the tracking devices on them. If you're trying to ghost run this mission, and yes, it can be ghosted despite having to eliminate at least one man as a primary objective, the crate immediately after the engine room can be a real pain in the ass, since it's tucked behind two doors that a guard regularly patrols. The inability to scan the crates from a safe distance adds an extra level of difficulty to this objective over the previous one, which is how video game design should work. However, most everything else about this optional objective is a downgrade from the previous one. First of all, how does Sam Fisher just happen to have 6 tracking devices in his wetsuit that he can apply to these crates? Are tracking devices part of Sam's typical arsenal? If so, why haven't we had a mission that used them until now? This wasn't something we were planning on doing when we departed for the mission, as Redding just got the idea to plant the tracking devices on them as you were approaching the first crate. Fisher himself didn't know he was going to have to do that, otherwise he wouldn't have asked Redding if he was supposed to scan them. Sadly, the tracking devices are the new laser mic from the previous games. Since the laser mic is now part of Sam's EEV, we obviously had to have some gadget that Sam would just happen to have with him that he doesn't carry normally despite not knowing he was going to need it. On top of that, there is absolutely no rhyme or reason to most of these crates' placement. They really are just scattered all over the place. Now, sure, the goal with the optional objectives from a gameplay point of view is to encourage players to explore the map top to bottom. But this is the one mission in the game where the placement of your optional objectives seems completely random. Now, in the previous mission, it made sense that the crates would be all over the place. The thugs had set up a temporary base comprised of tents and spotlights powered by portable generators, so I could absolutely buy that the weapon crates would similarly just be placed wherever. But here, this is a cargo ship. Transporting cargo is literally what these guys do for a living, so you'd think they would have some sort of standard process for where they store their stuff. Now, on the first weapon crate, it actually makes sense. You find it in a room that's filled with loads of other giant wooden crates. So these other crates must be other cargo that the boat is transporting. Same with the bill of lading that serves as a primary objective. There are other boxes in this room, so it makes sense that a box of cargo would be in a room dedicated to storing boxes of cargo. But after that, none of the placements make any sense. Perhaps the dumbest spot for a weapon crate is located in the freezer room of the ship's cafeteria. What? Why? Who? Why would you put a shipment of cargo in the fucking refrigerator room? I mean, there's a primary objective just before you reach this crate, where you find out that Lacerda is lying and saying that the weapon shipments are actually shipments of sugarcane and coconuts. It's never clarified if any of the ship's crew are aware of this lie, but even if they believe it, don't they know you're not supposed to eat the food you're supposed to be shipping? That's just downright unprofessional of them. So yeah, overall, 1 step forward, 2 steps back on this mission's optional objective. So your primary objective is to find and eliminate Lacerda. There are 2 ways to learn where he is. The first way is to grab the ship's captain from behind and interrogate him. Now this I have a problem with. When you interrogate the captain, you find out that he hates Lacerda and is only placating him because his bodyguards are trained professional assassins. He wants Lacerda taken out, so he happily complies with your request to tell you his whereabouts. He even volunteers that Lacerda brought a couple of bodyguards with him, so you'll be on your guard. So why can't Sam have the option of letting the captain go? You have to either knock him out or kill him. This is a bit retarded. Of course, this isn't even the only time in the game when I wish you had the option to let someone go after grabbing them. We head over to the captain's quarters, and lucky for us, Lacerda goes to find some booze, providing us with a perfect opportunity to sneak up behind him without alerting his 2 heavily armed bodyguards. Wow, what a good turn of fortune for us. Anyway, he says that he doesn't know who contacted him, as he was contacted anonymously. Fortunately, when we searched for the bill of lading, we found a bank that was used to finance Lacerda's payment, so that sets up the next mission for the game. Now, I have 2 problems with this section of the mission. The first is that Lacerda has way too much build-up and not enough payoff. He's built up as this bloodthirsty psychopath. As we eavesdrop on the ship's crew, we hear that he's a real self-entitled bastard. But when we finally meet him, he's essentially no different from any of the other dozen or so guards we've snuck up behind. Not to mention he ends up being a total pussy. The second problem I have with this section of the mission is with his bodyguards. They are said to be European, and yet they have American accents.
I don't see why you're so upset. He got you past the inspection. You think it's easy to get through the canal zone with all the crackdowns these days?
Seriously, guys, you couldn't have given them, oh, I don't know, French accents? Ubisoft is a French company. This game was developed in Montreal, as in Quebec, where they speak French. You're honestly telling me you don't have anybody working for you who can give us a fucking French accent so I can actually buy these guys as being European? Actually, yes, they do have a guy with a French accent, and I know this because one of the first guys you eavesdrop on in the very next mission in the game has a French accent.
No. What do they do?
Why didn't you get that guy to record the lines for Lacerda's bodyguards? Then they would actually sound European. Now, I'm going to go out on a bold limb here and say that this mission is technically ghostable. I say this because up until you actually confront Lacerda, you don't actually have to knock out or kill anyone else. In addition to interrogating the captain, you can find out where Lacerda is by sneaking into some control room. I don't know what this room is called in boat terminology, maybe somebody in the comments knows, and tap into this computer to find out where he is. Of course, this is not easy. You can't EEV the computer for some reason. You absolutely must physically walk up to the keyboard and access it the old-fashioned way. And whether you actually get caught seems dependent on RNG. In this shot, you can see that I sneak up to the computer and tap it without issue. but in most other instances, the guard sitting next to me seems to notice me. It took about 50 tries and the use of a sticky cam to get him to not see me. Of course, you still need to grab Lacerda from behind in order to take him out, don't you? Well, not really. See, Lacerda doesn't actually spawn in the captain's quarters until you find out where he is. So if you already know where he is, you can enter the captain's quarters while it's empty and plant a sticky camera there. As soon as you know where he is, you can switch to the sticky camera and immediately set off the knockout gas. Since killing Lacerda is mandatory, this knockout gas will kill him but only knock out his 2 totally not American bodyguards. Now, you might think this goes against the spirit of what a ghost run is, and in the absolute strictest sense of the word, I suppose you're right. However, the in-universe context for a ghost run is that Sam Fisher leaves behind no evidence that he was ever there to begin with. The next mission of the game is considered the first truly ghostable mission, and yet people are going to know you're there because they're going to notice the $50 million missing from the vault. But it's still considered ghostable because they'll never be able to prove that it was you. I see this tactic with Sticky Cam as much the same way. Yes, the ship's crew will notice that Lacerda is dead, but they'll never be able to prove that it was an American spy who did it. And considering how much the ship's crew hates Lacerda's guts anyway, they probably aren't going to investigate the murder very thoroughly anyway. So I still consider this a ghost run, since you still leave behind evidence that the crime was committed, but you still make it impossible for them to trace the crime back to you. However, one thing I actually found rather interesting about Lacerda is that he's a red herring villain. We spend 2 missions, a fifth of the game, chasing after Lacerda, and he ends up only being a pawn in someone else's plot. Compare that to the story of Pandora Tomorrow. In that game, this is the bad guy, this guy right here. He's the main villain. We know who he is, we know what he wants, and we know why the US Army can't just run up and put a bullet in his head, solving the crisis in 2 seconds. Every mission in that game is working towards stopping Sedona from unleashing the smallpox virus before we finally go after him directly. But in Chaos Theory, the focus is less on fighting back against the threat, so much as it is finding out who the real threat even is. It isn't until the halfway point of the game that the main villain is firmly established as the main villain, and he's a guy who we thought was our ally. I honestly prefer it this way. After all, Sam's role as a Splinter Cell is supposed to be about gathering intelligence, not neutralizing threats. The latter is what the army is for. So I much prefer Sam going behind enemy lines in order to actually spy on people, rather than just shoot people. So because Lacerda doesn't know who hired him to kidnap Morgenhold, we follow the only lead we can find, the bank where Lacerda's payment came from. This is one of the most popular missions in the game, with fans citing how it's the first ghostable mission in the franchise, as well as the sheer cool factor of actually breaking into a bank and robbing it. I definitely agree that this mission is fun as hell, but it certainly isn't flawless. For starters, there's these 2 doors. At first, you'd think that this game is giving you a choice of how to proceed. One door is locked behind a retinal scanner, so you may think that this is a hint from the game developers that the right path may require more stealthy mechanics but is otherwise the optimal route. Kind of like this moment in Super Mario Galaxy 2, which says experts stay right, thereby advising the player that the left side is easier, but the right side has the Comet Medal, which is necessary for 100%ing that game. Unfortunately, no, the most optimal route in this map is to take the left side. However, it's ultimately small potatoes that the game simply put the retinal scanner next to the wrong door. In fact, forget the retinal scanner for a minute, the real problem here is that there are 2 doors to choose from, with or without retinal scanners. This would suggest to you that there are 2 paths you can take. In fact, there really isn't, See, if you go through the door on the right, you pass by the door to the treasurer's office and then enter the courtyard. From there, you're stuck. If you take the left path, you can exit out the president's office through the window and climb down the wall into the courtyard, but that's only a one-way street. If you take the right path, you enter the courtyard and then run into a dead end. No matter what you do, you absolutely have to backtrack and take the left path anyway. In other words, these two doors, which purport on their face to offer a branching path, are literally nothing but a lie. This map isn't a non-linear map, it's a linear map with a dead end. If you're gonna make a linear map, give us a linear map, but don't fucking tease me with the promise of non-linearity if you're not gonna deliver the goods. So if we take that little boo-boo out of the equation, how does the rest of the mission hold up? Well, this mission has, in my opinion, the most pointless optional objective in the entire game. You're given a total of 8 fake emails that are designed to frame the bank's management for the theft you're about to do. Now, in this objective's defense, this is one of the few times it actually makes sense that you have to complete every step of the objective in order to get credit for it. As I mentioned earlier, that's usually a pain in the ass, since you still provide some benefit to the rest of Third Echelon by completing most of the optional objectives in question. However, in this case, if you only upload 7 of the 8 emails, and they all reference an 8th email that doesn't exist, the investigators will likely put 2 and 2 together that these emails were planted there to frame somebody. However, that's where my praise of this optional objective ends. You place these forged emails by finding the appropriate computers, tapping into them either physically or remotely using your EEV, and then checking a box. No, seriously, finding the appropriate computers is actually the tough part, and actually posting the emails there is literally as easy as pressing a button. Oh sure, you have to complete a hacking minigame to be able to do that. This is the first mission in the game to actually have a hacking minigame, by the way, but that isn't difficult to do in the slightest. Sure, I complained about it earlier, but that was a criticism of the training videos, not this objective. Once I knew what to do, the hacking minigame became a breeze. Frankly, seeing as this minigame allows you to bypass retinal scanners and keypad locked doors, as well as complete optional objectives, they really should have made this minigame a bit more difficult. As it stands, it's practically a cheat code to bypass entire game mechanics. Furthermore, these optional objectives are supposed to encourage you to comb the map trying to find all the different spots you're supposed to do things. To take advantage of this, the optional objectives need to be off the beaten path. However, 7 of the 8 computers you're supposed to plant fake emails on can be passed en route to your primary objectives as long as you take the aforementioned left path. Only one of these computers, the one at the front desk, requires you to take even a brief detour to access. This is yet another way in which this mission is really just a straight line pretending to be non-linear. Last but not least, this objective is entirely pointless. As I mentioned in the last mission, the optional objectives can't affect the story moving forward since they're, optional, and so the rest of the story has to be written on the assumption that the player didn't do them. But even in the context of this mission, the whole reason I'm supposedly doing this is to cover Third Echelon's ass in the robbery. However, Third Echelon is the last agency in the world who should need planted evidence to hide its involvement in anything. The whole point of Third Echelon in-universe is that they act from the shadows, both figuratively and literally. They are not publicly sanctioned by the US government, and anything they do is officially considered by the USA to have no suspects. When you think about it from that angle, leaving behind planted evidence not only seems unnecessary, but actually feels entirely counterproductive to how Third Echelon actually operates. But even if, by some miracle, the Panamanian police managed to trace the robbery back to the US government, what's Panama gonna do? Declare war on the United States? So yeah, this optional objective fails on nearly every conceivable level. It doesn't add any extra challenge to the mission, only 1/8 of the mission encourages any kind of exploration, and it doesn't even make sense in-universe. So as for your primary objective, in order to get into the vault, you'll need to authorize access from the security office, president's office, and treasurer's office. Once inside, you grab the intel, which is the real reason you're here, and then you grab the money. The money you're stealing is said to be the equivalent of 50 million US dollars, but it's in French currency, despite this mission taking place in a Panamanian bank. But the important thing is that it's worth $50 million in American currency. That's a lot of dough right there, and yet none of it appears on Fisher's character model. Where is he keeping that money? You'd think you'd need an entire truck to carry all that money off, or at the very least a giant sack that Fisher would have to lug over his back like an unconscious body. Is this money in the form of something other than a banknote, like for example negotiable instruments? Because you know you can't spend those things without there being a clear paper trail where it came from, meaning there's no point to stealing it. Overall though, this mission holds a special place in many Splinter Cell fans' hearts, as the first truly ghostable mission in the entire franchise. You don't even have to take out anyone as a primary objective. You can literally sneak around without ever touching anybody, and even if you don't ghost this mission, you are treated to one of the funniest interrogations in the entire franchise. That interrogation alone is worth the price of admission. So as you bring the intel back to Third Echelon, Grim analyzes it and realizes that someone called Dvorak had orchestrated the kidnapping and authorized Lacerda's payment. Unfortunately, we have no idea where Dvorak actually is, so just as all hope seems lost and the case might go cold, the mother of all coincidences happens. New York City, right at that moment, just happens to suffer from a blackout, and Lambert somehow realizes that this is the work of Dvorak.
This is no coincidence.
I know that because shut up! Well, it just so happens that, yes, this is indeed the work of Dvorak. Jesus, Lambert, while you're at it, can you tell me the winning lottery numbers? Now, this mission has a unique set of parameters. The civilians are under curfew while the blackout is in progress, so instead of them, we have members of the National Guard who we aren't allowed to kill. If we kill any National Guardsmen, we automatically get a 0% mission rating. If we kill more than one National Guardsman, we lose all our objectives except for our primary ones.
Damn it, Fisher, that's the second civilian you killed.
Lambert,
Save the whining for your evaluation. Complete your primary objectives and forget the rest. You're a hazard.
Roger.
Unfortunately, this isn't nearly as much of a roadblock to completing this mission as the game developers would like it to be, since, as I mentioned earlier, there's no downside to simply knocking them out. We eventually make it to Circassi's place, where we're meant to interrogate Circassi about what he and Dvorak are doing. When we get there, we come across the first moment in the game where we organically have a chance to pull a guard off a high ledge to his death. Yeah, you'd think the first chance to do that would be at the Lighthouse, considering that's what the trailers and marketing often show, and while you can do this move at the Lighthouse, it requires a lot of setup, which includes actually walking past the guard and actively choosing not to take him out when you have the chance, just so you can set up this cool looking move. As I've been alluding to this entire time, killing guards should be the easy way of completing the game, and non-lethal runs should require more careful planning and movement. So this highly elaborate setup, just for what essentially amounts to a cool looking animation, is kind of backwards. Meanwhile, this moment in the Penthouse mission is the first time where the opportunity to do this move is handed to you on a silver platter. Even better, this is one instance where not killing the guy actually takes more restraint from you than killing him. Since this is one of the few moves in the game that doesn't have a non-lethal variation, that means that in order to avoid killing this guy, you have to wait patiently for him to move out of the way. So we find out that there are some private security guards protecting this place. Fisher realizes that they have the same equipment as the guys who were protecting Lacerda. Now, this is weird, considering that Fisher never actually saw Lacerda's bodyguards, at least not necessarily. The vast majority of players will have taken advantage of Lacerda wandering into the kitchen to find some booze, and they would have never even bothered with Lacerda's bodyguards. So, how does Sam know what equipment those guys were armed with? It would make much more sense if the second mission actually forced you to take at least a single look at one or both of Lacerda's bodyguards. So we eventually find out, either by interrogating one of the guards or eavesdropping on one of them, that they are employed by Displace International. Dun dun dun! See, Displace is the largest private security company in the world, and is owned by Doug Shetland. This is a shock to the main characters, since Displace has a lot of contracts with the US government, and if you played Pandora tomorrow, you'd know that this is one of the few private companies that are allowed to know of Third Echelon's existence. So the idea that Displace is now suddenly committing treason against the USA is a big of a plot twist. But it is also simultaneously a plot hole. See, if you played Pandora tomorrow, and specifically if you played the submarine mission, you'd hear Lambert and Grimm mention how Sedona was buying weapons from a company called Displace. First of all, it's clear in that mission that they've never heard of Displace, even though they were working with Doug Shetland's company in the very previous mission. But here, Displace all of a sudden is Shetland's company. Second, Fisher had already uncovered intel that Displace were adhering to an enemy of the USA, giving him aid and comfort. Then how has Displace's management not already been arrested for treason? See guys, this is why I usually don't like to pay any more than mere lip service to the story of these games. So once we get to the Penthouse, we finally get our optional objective for this mission. Zerkasi has several security cameras with infrared capabilities, forcing Sam to use his night vision to see where the cameras are looking at any given point in time. In addition to providing a unique obstacle, Sam is also tasked with placing wiretaps on these cameras so Third Echelon can keep tabs on Zerkasi. Well, while I definitely find it contrived that Sam just happens to have some wiretaps on hand, just in case he happens to need them, Jesus Christ, I wonder what else he has stowed away inside that skin-tight wetsuit of his. Who designed this suit any damn way? Baggett Saget Barry? However, that break in immersion aside, I definitely enjoy how this adds an extra layer of challenge if you're looking to ghost this level, especially with this camera, where not one but two guards are patrolling back and forth. Finding an opening where both guards' backs are turned really requires some patience, and since the progress of tapping the cameras takes a few seconds, there's always a chance the enemies will turn around and at the last second and spot you. Speaking of ghost runs, this level can technically be ghosted, but doing so will cost you a 100% mission rating. See, there's a secondary objective to find out who these guys' immediate superior is. Not Doug Shetland, he's the top dog of the whole company, but who these guys immediately answer to. If you don't complete this objective, it becomes a primary objective in the next mission, plus you take a 15% ding to your mission score. There are two guards in this level who can give you this information. To complete this secondary objective, you absolutely must grab one of them and interrogate them. There's no computer you can tap into, no conversation you can eavesdrop on. This mission cannot be ghosted to 100%, which honestly sucks. Anyway, we eventually come across Dvorak, only to find out that Dvorak isn't a person, but rather a finite state machine. Oh sure, Grimm calls it an infinite state machine, but I checked online and I was unable to find any evidence that there ever was such a thing as an infinite state machine. So no, this is a finite state machine. Anyway, we grab a stack of executions for analysis and then make ourselves scarce. Now, Dvorak actually has a keeper. You can obtain the output stack in two ways. The first is by talking to him. The keeper, whose name we're never given, will walk you through the steps on how to use the machine. The second way is for Sam Fisher to recognize the finite state machine for what it is and operate the machine on his own. Now, that's all well and good, but what I really have a problem with is that if you kill the Keeper, hell, if you even so much as knock him out, Lambert will be pissed off at you for killing an innocent man. But is he really that innocent? Even if he isn't doing so knowingly, and that's never clearly established, he is nonetheless assisting a traitor to the USA in their attempts to commit treason. Not only that, but he found a way to circumvent American intelligence systems and avoid detection for months using a system of cathode ray tubes and punch cards. This guy should not be allowed to simply go free. He is way too dangerous, even if he's unwittingly dangerous, which, again, is not something that is clearly established in the story. I can understand not killing him if we want to give him the benefit of the doubt that he isn't doing this intentionally, but we should, at the very least, bring him in for questioning. So, since Displace has been fingered as a suspect in this conspiracy, again, we head over to the Displace headquarters to see if we can find any leads. However, in the cutscene immediately before this mission, Lambert can be seen talking to Admiral Otomo, leader of the Japanese military. Now, I didn't notice this until the most recent time when I played this game for footage, but there is a blink and you'll miss it foreshadowing in this cutscene. Near the end, we get a shot from Otomo's point of view, and we can see that he's using Zerkezi's computer to talk to Lambert, foreshadowing that he's actually in the loop about the bad guy's plans. I must confess, I don't like this moment at all. If you notice this on the first playthrough, it would really spoil the big moment in the bathhouse when you realize that Otomo is one of the main villains in the game. Sure, it's very easy to miss, but that just goes to show that they could have removed this foreshadowing from the game completely and it wouldn't have changed anything, so why even have it? This is one of only 2 missions in the game when you're not allowed to kill anybody. This is also the only mission in the game where you can't select the Assault loadout option. Presumably, this is because you aren't allowed to kill anyone, so a loadout where you're not equipped with enough non-lethal firepower just wouldn't work in this mission. However, in the other mission in the game where you can't kill anyone, you can still select the Assault option, so why limit my options here? Anyway, our first objective is to tap into some guy's laptop. He carries the laptop with him, and Lambert gave Fisher very strict, non-lethal parameters. No problem, I'll just wait until he's done, then knock him out. Oh wait, instead, the game wants us to do it another way. Turns out now, and only now, at the halfway point of the game, are we given the tutorial on how to use the EEV to tap into computers wirelessly. What the hell? Sam even reacts with shock and awe at how easy this EEV makes his job, even though he's used it dozens of times already. That said, I definitely like the optional objective in this mission. It's not that difficult since it merely requires a hacking minigame followed by simply checking a box. However, unlike the bank mission, this optional objective actually forces me to enter areas of the map I wouldn't have gone to otherwise, so it actually requires me to explore. Also, unlike the bank mission, there's an in-universe justification for this objective. Grimm wants the ability to look around Displace's files even after Sam is gone. This isn't simply to cover Third Echelon's involvement in the crime. Since Third Echelon is so secretive about what they do anyway, they should already be covered. Here, she's asking for access to something she doesn't already have access to, so it makes sense. So, let me counter that by saying that this mission has the worst secondary objective in the game. Unlike in the previous mission, you can ghost this mission and still get a 100% mission score, but to complete this mission's secondary objective, you have to already know where to complete it and you have to move fast. The minute you get off the elevator on the 3rd floor, you need to book it to the right and use your EEV to laser mic a conversation inside a glass room. If you hesitate for even a minute, you risk losing your opportunity to laser mic the conversation. When I played this game as a teenager, I would constantly do this mission over and over again, doing everything right but still getting an 85% mission rating, and it really pissed me off. You need an online guide in order to know what to do. Even knowledge from a prior playthrough probably won't help you in this case, since the objective is so easy to miss that you probably need the online guide just to be able to figure out even the first time. An objective like this really should have been a bonus objective, not a secondary one. At least those don't detract from your mission score if you don't complete them. Fortunately, this is the only example I can think of in the game of an objective other than a bonus objective being so obtuse. So as we eavesdrop on this conversation, we find out that Mylon Nedich, the alias given to the Displace supervisor in the previous mission, goes by the real name Nilos Nowak. He's a war criminal who's wanted in The Hague, not the Netherlands, just The Hague, for scalping some of his POWs. Also, he's supposed to be Bosnian in nationality, but heaven forbid they actually give him a Bosnian accent, or any accent other than American.
Look, never mind all that. The boss is on his way and things are heating up.
Look, I get it, they were probably on a tight budget. Even by 2005 standards, this game was still a AA title at best, not AAA. The problem isn't so much that they can't afford to bring in voice actors from all over the world. The problem is, much like with the misleading 2 doors and the bank mission, why would you tell a story involving characters of so many nationalities if you're not going to actually give them the nationalities they're supposed to have? So, we break into Shetland's own office and find out that Circassian is holed up in a place called Hokkaido, which is the Alaska of Japan. Whatever the hell that means. I mean, it certainly doesn't mean it's covered in snow and glaciers, since we travel to Hokkaido in the next mission, and it's clearly rock and sand. Anyway, as we wrap up this mission, we get a cutscene of Sam and Shetland meeting up at a bar. I honestly like how this scene goes. Sam tells Shetland that one of his men is playing both sides, and that Shetland needs to cut the man loose. Shetland refuses, saying it would be dishonorable of him to do that. He does offer to help bring Nedich in if Sam actually has some evidence against him. Since we later learn that Shetland is the main bad guy of this game, he's obviously lying about his willingness to cooperate. However, there's also a bit more subtlety in his offer. See, Shetland is one of the few private citizens in this universe who knows about Third Echelon. Because of this, he knows damn well that Third Echelon can't afford to actually bring forth any evidence without compromising the very secrecy that allows them to exist. Maybe Shetland is just lying when he says he's willing to cooperate, but maybe he is being sort of serious, except that he knows full well that Third Echelon won't be able to take him up on his offer. If I could change one thing about this cutscene, however, it would be that Sam's line where he refers to the suspected double agent as Nedich. Even if you've completed the aforementioned secondary objective and know full well that he's actually named Nolak. As I've said numerous times already, the story in this game has to be written on the assumption that the player has only completed the bare minimum objectives needed to advance the plot. So this cutscene has to be written under the assumption that the player didn't catch this very easy to miss secondary objective. However, this is the one time in the game where the story actually could benefit from an alternative cutscene if you've completed that objective. It's not even like it would take all that much extra effort to account for it either. It would only require Michael Ironside to record a single extra sentence, which the developers could just splice in with the existing cutscene. So we then head over to the self-proclaimed Alaska of Japan and infiltrate an innocent-looking tea house. There are no alarms in this mission, but the guards are already on medium-level alert anyway. we find a couple of cars near the beginning of the mission, whose only purpose is to provide you with a means of learning Neddish's true identity if you failed to get the secondary objective in the last mission. Otherwise, their presence there serves no purpose. We go through a brief stealth sequence involving squeaky mats, meaning we have to be extra slow in order to avoid making noise, and then we come across our optional objective for this mission. There are several invisible microphones scattered around the game map, and you're tasked with walking up to them and disabling them. The only problem is that they are invisible. This is probably the only time in the entire game when the electromagnetic vision can actually come in handy, as that's the only way to see the microphones. However, once again, this optional objective makes no sense in-universe. Supposedly, Admiral Otomo is the one who wants this done, however, this is on Japanese soil, so this begs the question of why Otomo can't simply use his own men to remove the bugs. Also, who put the bugs there in the first place if they weren't sanctioned under Japanese law? On the positive side, the fact that the microphones are invisible does force you to explore in order to find them. There's even a couple of interesting locations where the game gives you subtle hints as to where the microphones are located. In 2 locations, there are Displace employees scanning the walls with some device looking for microphones. They obviously aren't going to find any, since that would defeat the whole point of Sam having to do this himself. However, there's always this one spot where the Displace merc won't actually scan the walls, tipping you off that this is one spot where a microphone can be found. There's only 2 spots where this happens, but then again, if this happened every time, it would honestly get kind of contrived, and it would make the Displace marks look kind of incompetent, and they're supposed to be the most sophisticated paramilitary corporation in the world. Our first objective is to take out Nolak. When we do that, we're told that Shetland is coming to the very Hokkaido tea house that we're in, but we don't know why he's coming. We're given a new objective to eavesdrop on Shetland's meeting. When we see him meet up with Zerkezi, Shetland uses a samurai sword to cut Zerkezi down, since he now sees Zerkezi as a liability rather than a customer. Seeing an innocent man be murdered in cold blood by Shetland pushes Lambert's berserk button, leading to this exchange.
Guard, Fisher! Don't let Shetland escape!
Is he a target?
What? Huh? The guy just killed an innocent man. Is he a target? No, Fisher, you're supposed to run up to behind him and give him some surprise butt sex. Yes, he's a fucking target! So we chase after him. Unfortunately, this mission is not ghostable, since there are 2 guys who are blocking your only way out, forcing you to have to shoot out this lantern to create darkness to enable you to slip away unnoticed. You can't even OCP this lantern either because its light is based on fire, not electricity. So at the very least, you have to leave behind at least that much evidence that you were there. Unfortunately, once we reach the area with the 2 cars, Shetland gets away in a helicopter. It turns out that it was impossible to catch him in this mission in order to set up for the Bathhouse mission. No matter, because now that he's got 3rd Echelon on his tail, we'll follow him literally to the ends of the earth if we have to. But before we can go after Shetland, we suddenly have a North Korean missile blowing up an American warship, so the next 2 missions are spent dealing with that instead of going after Shetland. Oh my god, this is fucking dumb. Earlier I praised how this game was using Lacerda as a red herring villain, and how the first half of the game was primarily dedicated to following the crumb trail to eventually find out who the main villain actually was. But this is just bad storytelling. We just completed the 6th mission out of 10 missions. That's 3/5 of the way through the game, and now, and only now, is the game finally introducing its B-plot. I'm sorry, but this B-plot is just shoehorned in at the last minute. These next 2 missions, which are dedicated entirely to resolving this B-plot while ignoring Shetland entirely, just come off as filler. It's like the developers wanted to have 10 missions, but they only have enough story for 8, so they shoehorned in some contrived B-plot about a missile sinking a battleship that doesn't have anything at all to do with the main plot. Now, I know what some of you were thinking. It gets some lip service in the final mission when it was revealed that Atomo was the one who hijacked the North Korean battery, and that's why the world is so close to war. So, just to clarify, my gripe with this subplot isn't so much that it exists, but how shoehorned in it feels. There's just no way for the story to fit this subplot in at this late a point. It would probably have felt far less contrived if this missile was actually how the game opened. What if Morgenhold was the sole survivor of the missile strike, and he managed to swim to shore at this lighthouse in the middle of bumfuck nowhere, and that was the reason Fisher was sent to rescue Morgenhold, because it just so happened that Lacerda was at the lighthouse waiting for any survivors of the missile strike to get washed up on shore, thereby tipping off Third Echelon that the missile strike was part of a much greater conspiracy. Of course, I'm just spitballing at this point, but then again, as I mentioned in my Pandora Tomorrow retrospective, I'd rather have a mission with no story at all than a story that makes no sense. As I alluded to in my Splinter Cell 1 retrospective, the Splinter Cell games are platformers by genre, and platformers don't really need stories, they just need to have good level design. If you absolutely must have a story in every mission, then maybe you could have each mission be a standalone story. To show you what I mean, take a look at the Dark Brotherhood questline from the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion. In that questline, there's a main plot regarding a traitor infiltrating the Dark Brotherhood and looking to destroy it from the inside. But before you get to that main plot, you actually go on a total of 8 assassination missions, 9 if you count the initiation quest. Each of these missions have stories behind them, but these missions and their corresponding stories are just as independent of each other as they are of the overarching story arc. You could have had these 8 missions in any order, and the overarching story would have made just as much sense. Chaos Theory, likewise, could just as easily have had about a half a dozen entirely standalone missions before we actually dived into the main plot regarding Shetland. But sadly, that's not what we got, so instead we head over to... Our next mission is to infiltrate the battery where the missile came from, and see if we can learn if the missile was launched intentionally. I gotta admit, I love how Sam uses his dry wit to poke fun at how overbooked he's being.
So, besides stopping World War III, is there anything else I can do for you this evening?
Since everyone is asking everyone for intel, I'd love to have a few chips at the big table.
What can I get you, Will?
See if you could get the logs from the other 3.
Now serving number 67.
However, this would probably be a lot funnier if we, the players, felt similarly overbooked. Like, imagine if we had done this right after finishing up another mission. It was a double-length mission where we had about 10 primary, secondary, and optional objectives, with only a loading screen and a cutscene in between, and most importantly of all, we didn't actually restock our gear in between the missions, so we were strapped for gear when we got to this point. Then, we would be feeling just as thinly stretched as Sam is, so the dry wit would feel even more close to home. It's still good for what it is, just a thought. Anyway, our optional objective for this mission is kind of a letdown for this late in the game. We're getting to the point where the optional objectives really need to step up their game in terms of challenge and how out of their way they have to be. Sadly, the optional objective in this mission can be completed with your AEV from a safe distance, is entirely en route to your primary objectives, and doesn't even require a hacking minigame to complete. For the record, this is the 3rd mission in the game whose optional objective has involved nothing more than tapping into a computer from a safe distance and checking a box. Although I will admit, to complete this objective while ghosting is a huge challenge. Unlike the bank and Displace, the guards in this mission are fairly active in walking back and forth from one station to the next, and there's plenty of light in this mission that you can't OCP. So especially in the last 2 spots where you need to do these optional objectives, actually finding a spot to stand where you can use the EEV and actually have enough time to properly use it can be a challenge. So we sneak into some room on the second floor and eavesdrop on a conversation between the two highest ranking officers in that battery. One of them says there was no malfunction, even though there clearly was a malfunction of some kind. This pushes the other guy's berserk button and he kills the other. Grim takes this as proof that the missile wasn't launched from this silo intentionally. On a hunch, however, Grim still wants us to check the missile launcher to see if its launch was caused by that Dvorak machine from the 4th mission, since unlike the soldiers at this battery, Grim would actually know what to look for. We hack into the launcher and find that yes, it was indeed Dvorak. However, she was unable to trace the launch any further back than Soule, South Korea, which sets up our next mission and does so in the sloppiest way possible. Seriously, why do we need to trace the launch? We already know damn well that Dvorak is located in New York. I mentioned earlier that this mission and the next mission were just pointless filler, so the game can technically have 10 missions, but the next mission is by far the most pointless filler of them all, although I'll go into even more detail when I talk about that mission. As soon as you trace the missile launch back to New York City,
Soule.
Like I said, New York City, war suddenly gets declared between North and South Korea. The very battery we're currently in is getting ready to launch a missile at South Korea, this time on purpose, and so Fisher is tasked with aborting the missile. Fisher asked out loud why this war was declared when we literally just found proof that North Korea didn't launch the missile on purpose, but we never get an answer to that question, even though it's a good question. It isn't because the Dvorak fingerprint was routed through South Korea, since literally nobody except 3rd Echelon even knows that's the case yet. So we head over to the other side of the silo only to find that the missile takes off before Sam has a chance to stop it. Fortunately, Sam has an idea.
The warhead won't arm until it's a few hundred meters from its target. If I can dig up the abort codes.
Wait, how does he know that? He's a soldier, not a rocket scientist. That's why he has a team of tech engineers ready to analyze the data he collects. It honestly would have made so much more sense if someone like Grim or Redding had this idea. Fine. Anyway, this is the first of only 2 primary objectives in the game that has a timer on it. Fortunately, if you know what you're doing, you can ghost the entire mission and still complete this objective with more than a minute left on the clock, and since ghosting is the slowest way to complete this game, I'd say the timer is pretty lenient. That said, I am a bit confused about this line right here.
The missile is closing on the USS Ronald Reagan at top speed.
Hold on. Did you just tell me I need to win one for the Gipper?
Dude, what does that even mean?
Never mind. You're right, Grim. I am old.
Now, sure, this is just yet another one of the banter between Fisher and Grim about how old Fisher is, but I'm curious, and maybe somebody can post a comment explaining this. What exactly does it mean to win one for the Gipper? Is President Reagan supposed to be the Gipper? If so, why would it be winning one for Reagan, who isn't even the president anymore, just because he's preventing the destruction of a ship that's named after him? And why would Fisher find the idea of winning one for the Gipper to be so preposterous? This joke would probably make a lot more sense if I actually, understood it. Overall, this mission presents a decent challenge for the late game. As I've mentioned in the past, this game finally understands how to do progressive difficulty, with the easiest mission, one that doesn't even have alarms at all, being the first mission, and each mission being more difficult than the last. Unfortunately, that all goes to shit when we get to... This is the only mission in the game that's divided up into 2 parts, separated by a loading screen. You start the mission inside a burning building, which begs the question of where exactly you got dropped off by your crew. Even though the USA is supposed to be allied with South Korea, Sam Fisher still has the nerve to ask whose side he's on, as if he doesn't already know, just so Lambert can inform the player, not Fisher, but the player, that every NPC in the mission will shoot on sight. As soon as you start the mission, you're given a task of interrogating one of the first guys you come across, so the 2 Splinter Cells in the co-op campaign can get some information they need for their mission. This is the only time in the game when you absolutely have to interrogate someone. Sure, there's that guy on the Penthouse mission who you have to interrogate to find out about Milan Nedic, but that's only for a secondary objective. This time around, it's a primary objective. However, it's the only time in the game when this happens, so it's excusable. However, what's less excusable is that, just like with Lacerda, one of the guys you're meant to grab just happens to go wandering off on his own, making him ripe for the picking for you to grab him without alerting his buddy. Once was kinda funny, but twice is just tedious. Once that segment is out of the way, we then get our first optional objective for this mission. Yes, since this mission is divided into 2 parts, we actually have 2 optional objectives this time around. The first one is to shut down the propaganda broadcasts so the South Koreans won't be belittled by North Korean propaganda. This is a rather interesting objective since it's kind of a cross between an optional objective and a bonus objective. There are 3 stations you need to shut down, but in order to even get the objective, you have to shut down one of them on your own initiative, thus making the optional objective somewhat hidden. So that definitely gives this optional objective some unique flavor. We also get a secondary objective to tap into the computer of some communications van. If we don't complete this objective here, we'll have to complete it in the second half of this mission. This secondary objective is a pain in the ass to do if you're wanting to ghost the mission, since this guy has his back to you, making it a walk in the park to sneak up on him, but a pain in the ass if you just want to get him out of the way without knocking him out. However, because of the earlier primary objective, you absolutely cannot ghost this mission no matter what, so I didn't even bother to ghost this section. So then we get to the thing that was the whole reason we came here in the first place, breaking into their data servers to see if we can figure out where the missile launch codes originated from, even though we already know. So we grab the hard drive and then make our way up to the rooftop to transmit the data over a secure network. But before we do that, we get this. Okay, what the hell was that, game developers? How the hell was I supposed to know that this wall was going to blow up? I consider this to be on par with the landmine and spotlight section of the previous 2 games in terms of cheap deaths. And the saddest part is this isn't even the only time the game pulls cheap shit like this. Okay, I take cover behind one of the servers and then I get to the elevator and get up to the rooftops. Lambert says we'll be extracted from the rooftops if all goes well. Now it comes off like the game is trying to tip the player off. The player is obviously meant to suspect that something is going to happen, because otherwise this would be the shortest mission in the game. However, there's a slight problem with how this curveball is handled. In Pandora Tomorrow, the train mission was even shorter than this mission. When I played that game for footage, I spent less time on that mission than I had already spent on this mission even as is. And that included me having to reload and restart the mission from the top because I had encountered a serious game-breaking bug. See my Pandora Tomorrow retrospective for more details. So while Fisher and Lambert are trying to subtly elbow the player on the side, warning them that this isn't going to be as easy as it seems, I honestly can totally buy that the mission being this short, since I've already done missions in this franchise that were even shorter than this. But of course, the plane that's supposed to receive our data transmission gets shot down by a bazooka. Jesus, you'd think with a budget of $60 million, you'd think to put some armor on that plane. I can buy that an anti-air missile can knock a plane out of the sky, but a single RPG that can be held, aimed, and fired by a single man? That plane is made out of tinfoil right there. So our new objective is to find the plane's wreckage and try to get the data transmitted from there. This is where the bulk of this mission comes from. Because of this has to be the most concentrated amount of pure platforming in the game. This really is just a platforming level. You go from the start to the finish, and once you reach the finish ends. However, there are still a few things I'd like to talk about. For starters, you eventually come across this guy. Now, just like with the ship's captain in the second mission, I think it would be a nice touch if you had the option to let this guy go. Maybe you could explain to him that he was going to shoot you on sight because he was so jumpy and scared, and then he promises to actually treat you like an ally if you let him go. From there, he actually assists you in the rest of the mission, telling you where you can find the wrecked plane, assisting you in shooting various North Korean soldiers, so on and so forth. Perhaps he could assist you in performing co-op moves, such as giving you a leg up, kind of like the first mission in Double Agent, to allow you to take shortcuts you wouldn't otherwise be able to access and bypass a good chunk of the enemies. Maybe when you get to the end, he could even assist you in rescuing the American pilots by grabbing one of the pilots while you get the other one. It's still good the way it is, I'm just Monday morning quarterbacking at this point. Speaking of which, words cannot express how much I love this optional objective. Both in-universe and in-game, Sam Fisher is getting absolutely no reward for rescuing these pilots, and there are plenty of instances where Fisher kills people without remorse, even if those people have done absolutely nothing wrong. Sure, you're not supposed to kill civilians in these missions, but even then, Fisher displays no remorse if you do kill them. But here, we get a true glimpse into Sam's moral compass, and this character development can best be illustrated in this exchange between him and Lambert.
You don't even exist, Fisher. You can't get a medal for this.
Medals don't help me sleep at night, Lambert.
America, fuck yeah. That being said, I definitely have to take umbrage with Lambert's assertion that Fisher doesn't even exist. As I mentioned in the first game, Third Echelon has a protocol in place known as Protocol 6, where in the event that Sam Fisher's actions are uncovered and brought into public light, the USA will cover up for them having such a blatantly unconstitutional agency by pretending that they have no knowledge that this guy even exists, let alone that they are officially sanctioning his actions. This line about Fisher not existing is obviously a reference to Protocol 6. However, in the CIA mission of the first game, Lambert says that Fisher has lost existence privileges until the mission is over, implying that Fisher's existence will once again be recognized if Fisher is able to pull off this mission to the letter. But here, Lambert is saying that Fisher already doesn't officially exist. If that's the case, then Lambert was talking out of his ass when he said that Fisher had lost existence privileges only for the duration of the CIA mission. So, which is it, Lambert? Does Fisher have existence privileges when spying on foreign soil, or does he not? Well, when we finally reach the plane wreckage, we realize that it's too badly wrecked to retrieve any data from it. So the only thing we can do is destroy the plane so the enemy can't get any of our secrets from it. This means that this mission, as well as the mission that preceded it, were both a complete waste of time. The previous mission only existed to set up this mission, and both of these missions dragged us away from the main plot of going after Shetland, just as we learned that he was the bad guy, and all of it was for fuck all. As I mentioned before, platformers don't need stories behind them, but if you're going to have a story, at least have that story be good. Have you guys never heard of Chekhov's gun? It basically goes like this. If you say in the first chapter that there is a rifle hanging on the wall, in the second or third chapter it absolutely must go off. If it's not going to be fired, it shouldn't be hanging there. And then not have there be any payoff to it. Ugh. And then not have there be any payoff to it. Ugh. So, now that we've had a 2-mission long detour, we can now finally get back to what should have been our primary objective all along. going after Shetland. As we're deposited outside the bathhouse, we're given our optional objective for this mission, to tap some phone lines. See, it turns out that this bathhouse is owned by some organized crime syndicate, and the local chief of police has asked for our assistance in wiretapping their phones so they can hopefully catch the crime syndicate in the act of doing something illegal. This is honestly one of the best optional objectives in the game. One of the phone lines requires you to take the longer, more roundabout way to your main objective. See, as you exit this bathroom right here, you're presented with two directions you can go. Unlike the bank mission, however, these choices actually mean something. The right side is the shortest path to your objective, but the left side is needed to complete the optional objective by tapping the second of 3 phone lines. Meanwhile, the third phone line isn't exactly out of your way, but it is well hidden, shrouded in darkness, and it doesn't exactly stick out like a sore thumb, so you really have to be paying attention to find it. They require you to physically approach the phone lines, so you can't just EEV the objects from a safe distance, and it takes a few seconds for Sam to complete the phone tapping animation. This presents an extra challenge with the second phone line, as it's lit up and has 2 guards standing right next to it. If you want to ghost this mission, you need to be really light on your feet to perfectly balance your timed usage of the OCP, the guard's movement patterns, and how long it will take you to actually tap the phone before slipping back into the darkness. I honestly wish all 3 phone lines were this challenging. For the penultimate mission, it would certainly have earned such a difficulty spike. Anyway, as we infiltrate the bathhouse, we find that ISDF is also there. Lambert is hopeful that Otomo is there to apprehend Shetland, so they don't have to. However, when we get there, we find out that Otomo is actually in cahoots with Shetland. Now, this could be considered a whopper of a plot twist, except for one problem. The game already let the cat out of the bag when we saw that Otomo was broadcasting from Zerkazi's computer. So anyway, Shetland takes out some of Otomo's men and a shootout ensues. We are tasked with chasing down Shetland and eliminating him. This is often praised for being a tense and exciting climax, and while I definitely admit that the atmosphere for this set piece is epic, the story being told is just bad. I mean, it's literally just one cliché action movie line of dialogue after another.
You've made yourself the instrument of a policy you don't believe in, Sam.
92.
Blood is thicker than water, and you and I have bled a lot together. You're trading your honor for their agenda.
355.
We have to tear it down and start over. It's the only way.
Ooh, wow, 419.
This war will change things, Sam. Every other war has been about keeping things the same, but the status quo doesn't work anymore.
190.
You're right, Doug. I wouldn't shoot an old friend.
Oh my! 12.
However, I definitely have to give props to the way the game handles the actual death of Shetland. At the end, Shetland says that Sam wouldn't shoot an old friend, and you're given a choice to either shoot Shetland or lower your gun. If you shoot Shetland, he falls into some dark place, and Fisher gives this line.
You're right, Doug. I wouldn't shoot an old friend.
However, if you lower your gun, Fisher instead pulls out his knife and stabs Shetland, and the same cutscene plays. However, even though we've taken out Shetland, we have learned that Otomo is also one of the bad guys. So that leads us to... Gameplay-wise, this choice doesn't really mean anything, but the choice does have some impact because it completely recontextualizes Sam's line about not shooting an old friend. It could mean that he doesn't consider this to be the same as Shetland that he befriended all those years ago, or it could just be yet another instance of Sam's dry wit, where he basically says, yeah, I wouldn't shoot an old friend, but that doesn't mean I can't shank you. Now, you can indeed ghost this mission. I have seen videos on YouTube about ghosting the mission. However, even though I know what to do, I still lack the skill to pull this off. I can ghost all the way up to the final room of the mission where the bombs are planted, but no matter how hard I try, I cannot seem to get the hang of where to place these sticky cameras and when to have them go off in order to ensure that the guards don't see me. OCPing the lights won't do me any good in this section since the guards are equipped with thermal vision, and I can only ever have a maximum of 2 smoke bombs in this mission. So sadly, I highly doubt I will ever get a 100% ghost run of this game. I've heard a lot of people criticize this mission for being a real buzzkill after the last mission. The last mission was so climactic and so exciting that there was no way this mission was going to top it. For the past 15 years I had been inclined to agree. However, now that I've binge played the first 3 games for this retrospective series, all in the course of a single month, I have to wonder, why be mad now? As I hopefully demonstrated in the past 2 retrospective videos, the first 2 games also had horrible pacing, both in terms of its story and its difficulty progression. The fact that this game's story has even a decent narrative flow makes it a huge step up from the first 2 games. So anyway, our objective is to infiltrate the ISDF headquarters and try and gain intelligence to see if Atomo's actions are sanctioned by the Japanese government. Since if they are, that means Third Echelon needs to pull out and let the actual army handle it. While we're snooping around, we can't kill anyone, since if any Japanese soldier dies, Japan would treat it as the equivalent of a declaration of war. It's never fully explained why, but I'm going to go out on a limb here and assume that the reason why is that, because Atomo knows about Third Echelon, they can't rely on Protocol 6 if this goes south. So if the US government tries to pretend like they had nothing to do with Fisher's actions, Atomo will know instantly that they're lying. Anyway, this is the second of 2 missions in the game where you aren't allowed to kill anyone, and since this is the final mission of the game, the jump in difficulty is very much warranted. What is not warranted is the fact that this is the only mission in the game without an optional objective. It has a bonus objective but no optional one. They really should have gone all out to make the final mission the most challenging mission in the entire game, both to complete any percent and to complete 100%. Now here's something that must be a glitch because for the life of me, I couldn't figure out what was causing this. See, I grabbed one of these guys and interrogated him, and he told me that they carry some extra sticky shockers in the room next to the servers. So I go there and find those sticky shockers and then break into the server room in order to complete the bonus objective. When I return to the main section of the map, I go down the stairs and set off an alarm. Every single time I go down these stairs, an alarm goes off. I check my night vision, I check my thermal vision, I even checked my electromagnetic vision. I couldn't find anything that would have set off this alarm. No lasers, no cameras, no tripwires, nothing. It wasn't just a body being discovered either, because it always went off precisely when I went down these stairs. If I reloaded and waited a few minutes before going down the stairs, the alarm would similarly be delayed. Since I couldn't find an alternative way back to the main section of the map, I eventually just gave up and ate an alarm. Anyway, we eventually learn that there's a top secret meeting going on in the war room, and the only way into the war room without authorization is to slip in through the air duct. We do so and find out that Atomo is not only plotting against the USA, but also against his own emperor, planning to overthrow the emperor and install a martial state in Japan. In a further attempt to frame North Korea for war, he decides to use Dvorak to hijack another one of North Korea's missiles. God, we really should have arrested that old man when we had the fucking chance. And this time fire it on one of his own country's cities. This gives us all the intel we need to know that Atomo's actions are not sanctioned by the rest of the Japanese government, and so our fifth freedom is restored. Good thing, too, since we have a strict 3-minute time limit to abort the missile, and as soon as we get down to the bottom floor, we see a team of 3 Japanese soldiers planting some wall mines. Ghosting past these guys would likely require some pretty elaborate setup, and time is of the essence. So let's just shoot one of these wall mines and take them all out at once. So we then go through this corridor and we get gunned down by this automated turret. Yeah, remember earlier when I said that the exploding wall in Soule wasn't the only cheap death in this game? Well, here we have another one. Once you know it's coming, you can easily OCP the turret, but we should be able to figure that out on our first playthrough, and not have to rely on metagaming to get past this obstacle. So we abort the missile and then confront Atomo. We do not have Fifth Freedom with Atomo, since we need to bring him to a war crimes tribunal to have him publicly answer for his crimes. So to prevent us from taking him in, he tries to kill himself. We have to get in there and stabilize him, which includes little more than pulling the knife out of his gut. And then we blast our way out and are on our way to extraction. Cue some news fluff with some random person gets all the credit for Sam's hard work, and cut to end credits. It's anticlimactic, but honestly, that's part of the course by this point. Chaos Theory is often hailed by many Splinter Cell fans as a masterpiece. While I certainly enjoyed this game immensely, and still do, it is far from perfect, and a lot of the game's flaws, namely the story, are heavily overlooked because so many fans love the crap out of this game. As I have hopefully demonstrated today, this game definitely has flaws. However, its flaws are much fewer and farther between than those of Splinter Cell 1 and Pandora Tomorrow. My biggest gripe with Chaos Theory, however, is that there isn't more of it. Much more so than any other game in the franchise, this game could do with a level editor to allow players to share their custom maps with each other. It has the non-linearity to make it work, and while the custom maps couldn't have any original voice acting, the Ops app could be used to give whatever context is needed for any mission. Instead of playing these same 10 missions over and over again for the past 15 years, they really start to lose their magic that they had when I played them for the first time. This is actually a big reason why I was so cynical about this game in today's retrospective. As you play the missions for the 1000th time, the cracks start to show. Now for the rankings. I said at the end of the last retrospective that this game was going to be ranked higher than both Splinter Cell 1 and Pandora Tomorrow. And I stand by that. Yes, the game has its flaws, but frankly the fact that I've played this game more times than I could count just goes to show how much more fun it is compared to the first two games. The first two games, I was able to find things to complain about on a single playthrough, but this game, I know this game like the back of my hand. Next time I will do a retrospective of the Splinter Cell game I have the second most amount of experience with, Splinter Cell Double Agent. If you want to see the rest of the Splinter Cell retrospectives, be sure to subscribe to stay notified. Also check out some of my other videos on this channel. I do really long and in-depth analysis of video games, and if you enjoy my channel's content, please consider supporting me directly, either on Patreon or with channel memberships, so that I can one day call this my full-time job. Silver level patrons and channel members are allowed to submit requests for video topics for me to cover, and gold level members and patrons can straight up assign me topics and be guaranteed to have me cover them. In the meantime, however, I am Acerthorn, and I will see you guys later.